Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's show. I've got various things to talk about this evening, which hopefully you'll find interesting. I'm sure you will. But before then, let's look at what's coming up. Well, there's only going to be one more live stream before we take a break for the summer. So next week, it's not quite fixed yet, but we're hoping to have a Muslim lady speaking to Phil Tanzer. So I won't give anything else away about that at the moment, but you can find out who that is and what they're going to talk about next week. So hopefully we'll be able to sort that out. I think we're getting there with that. So that will be very interesting. Then we'll take a break for the summer. We'll be back, is it 24th of August maybe? So we'll be starting again so after mid-August. We'll be gearing up. And after then, you'll see quite a few developments with the live stream. One of the things we're hoping to do before too long is to have a sort of phone-in type thing. But instead of just phone in, people will actually appear on the screen to have a chat as well, just like you get on the radio and you get on some TV shows as well. Now, this will be a bit more live and risky than you normally get with the TV, because with the TV, they have a delay. So if someone comes out and starts spouting nonsense, they can chop them before it actually gets broadcast. And also, they will vet people before they let them on. We won't have those sort of things. We'll be a bit more rough and ready, and people will come on and we'll just see what happens. Judging by some of the people, some of the comments we get, there's a few people who hang around the live stream to cause trouble. But if that happens, well, let's see what happens. In any case, so that's the live stream after the summer. What else have I been doing? What have we been working on as a family party? We're still working on the conference, 13th of November. Get that date in your diary. We're just trying to finalize a venue. At the moment, sufficiently large, we think probably over 200 people we'd hope would be coming to our conference. I also finished a video this morning. Remember my series of videos about the rshp.scot sex education resources? They've been very widely viewed, quite influential as well. One thing that they've resulted in, basically on the rshp.scot resources, which is the Scottish Government's official sex education resources, it was delegated to a company to produce them, but it's paid for by councils with Education Scotland supervising and the government. So it's the official sex education resources. And we tried to embarrass them about the content. We challenged the content. We alerted people about the content. So it started off saying something like, these resources were produced in conjunction with the Scottish Government. That's what it said at first. Then it changed to say, the Scottish Government and Education Scotland have just been consultants. So they're just distancing themselves a bit, as though they're a little bit embarrassed by it. And now, lo and behold, you go to the website, and it doesn't mention the Scottish Government or Education Scotland at all. So they've obviously thought, right, well, this is a bit embarrassing. So we'd rather distance ourselves from these corrupting and vulgar sex education resources. So they just, cut themselves off from it a little bit. What does that say about their mentality? So we point out that their sex education resources are disgusting and corrupting and immoral. So what do? They think, this is a bit embarrassing. We'll just distance ourselves from them. But we'll still have them used in all the schools. That's absolutely fine. They don't have a problem with that. They're not interested in protecting children from these harmful messages. What they're interested in is protecting their own reputation. That's the number one priority for the SNP. So that's what they've done. And so, it's absolutely clear it's Scottish family party pressure that has resulted in the government and Education Scotland disowning their own sex education resources, while they're still hoping all the schools are using them, which they will be. Anyway, the video I've made is focusing on a video from a lesson plan. And you can watch it. It's going to come out maybe tomorrow night. But the theme of this video is obviously saying to young people, this is aimed at up to 15-year-olds, so they're all underage. Having sex will be illegal for them. But saying to them basically, we want you to have good sex. We want to take away any barriers that will make sex less than perfect for you. So they talk about pornography, for example, but it's not pornography is a bad thing. It's pornography can stop you having sex as good as it could be. So we don't want that to happen to you. We want you to recognize that pornography might spoil your sex, and then once you understand that, it won't spoil your sex, and you'll be able to have fantastic illegal underage sex behind your parents' backs. That's part of their message explicitly as well. It's quite bizarre. Anyway, look out for that tomorrow. That will be coming soon. Now, last week, if you were watching, we heard from Stuart Geddes, who is looking at standing in the council elections for us as well. We're going to have candidates around the country in the council elections in May next year. And he spoke about the Spaces for People scheme, about the way councils, I think it's around Scotland, but certainly in Edinburgh, they're putting bollards up in strange places and widening footpaths for no discernible purpose, adding cycle lanes, blocking cars off from here, then everywhere. I mean, I'm quite a cyclist, I don't mind a few cycle lanes and whatever, all fine. But some of the things they've done are just utterly bizarre. And it so happens that today I was out on my bike and I went past one of the places where there is the most bizarre implementation of the Spaces for People scheme. So I hopped off my bike, got my phone and just recorded a quick video to show you what it's like. So I'm going to show you that now. So we're going over to Bournemouth in the west of Edinburgh. Just watch this. We are in Bournemouth in Edinburgh, and I'm going to have a look at the council's incredible Spaces for People scheme in action. I mean, this is just wonderful. I'll turn the camera around. So previously, when I came along here on my bike, I could cycle just along this part here. It was great. You're really out from the centre of the road. You can't do that anymore because of this new pavement extension. You now have to cycle much more in the middle of the road, which is obviously more dangerous. But the really fantastic thing that they've done is previously you had to walk along this path. It was like balancing on a tightrope. But now, look what they've done. You can now stumble off the curb and walk down what used to be the road instead. I mean, it's fantastic. Then you get to here, then you have to turn back and go back to the other path to cross over someone's driveway. I mean, why no one thought of this before, I don't know. I mean, look at this fantastic pavement here. Instead of walking straight on down the big wide path, I can now do this instead. I can turn left. Oh, hang on, sorry, just stumbling off the curb. I can turn right. I can go over here, see the cyclist pushed off into the middle of the road. And then I can turn left here and go back onto the path. Isn't that amazing? And I don't know how much that cost. I mean, that would have cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds. But the benefits are just, well, I mean, what can you say? I'll do it in reverse. Just look at this. You can see my bike straight ahead. So instead of going straight ahead, I can now do this instead. Walk out into the road, take a detour, avoiding catching coronavirus, more than no people here in this very quiet residential neighbourhood. Then I can go back to the path and I can walk along here. Now there's my bike. Now I guess the best to get to my bike, I'd best go out into the road again, go along a bit, and then I can turn and I go up the curb back to my bike. I mean, is that or is that not just genius? It's fantastic. How about that then? I mean, can anyone in the comments, can anyone explain to me what on earth are they thinking by extending a path just for a few meters there? So you have to go out of your way down and up the curb to use it. It just makes no sense. I mean, it seems to me apparent what they're really doing is they're just trying to discourage car use. They're trying to make parking your car and driving your car more and more difficult. And that's what it's really all about. Why are they doing that? I think with a lot of councils, same with the Scottish government, they don't really have their own vision of what to do with the city. So instead, they just look to international bodies. What's the UN saying to do? What's the EU saying? I know we're not in the EU, but they still look at what they're doing. And they'll be saying, oh, you want to pedestrianize everything, get rid of cars. So they'll think, oh, well, that must be the good thing to do. That's what we'll try to do. It's not what the population of Edinburgh want. I mean, there's huge controversy about this Spaces for People scheme. But they just take the vision from international bodies, implement it over the heads of the population, and you end up with total nonsense like that. I say, if anyone can explain in the comments, am I missing something here? Is there actually a sensible purpose in a pavement extension like that? I mean, I'd be happy to hear if there is, but I just cannot imagine it. Right, let's see what comments we've got. Will the conference be online this year? No, it won't. We'll publish some parts later, recorded, but it won't be live online. So everyone will need to come along, and we'll getting together, networking, etc. will be a large part of the event. Does the Scottish Family Party view the LGBT as a political banner? I think, for example, the rainbow flag I would class as a political symbol, very definitely, because the things it promotes are political issues. There are lots of things clearly associated with it that I would say were political. Right, I had to leave school at 16. I should bring these on screen, shouldn't I? I had to leave school at 16. Wasn't planning to. Leftism started accelerating massively. I hope you complained. Hope you wrote to the head teacher, and write to the education secretary, write to the council. I mean, I say I hope you do that. I mean, it's just good that they hear that. I mean, would it make any difference? No. In Scottish education, they're so convinced they've got the one true truth, and the purpose of education is to inculcate basically the Green Party's philosophy into all the young people of Scotland. So, Paul, if that's your real name, congratulations for spotting what's happened, and hopefully you've resisted it. Right, SNP used their sex education as an LGBT vote winner to win the young votes by enabling them to vote before they have any life experience. Now, I think votes at 16, Scottish Family Party doesn't have a policy on the votes at 16, which are allowed in a Scottish election. My personal view, I think, is I'm very skeptical. If you look at what was happening in the election campaign last time, it was so blatantly aiming to bribe school pupils, which is what a lot of them are. So it was the free laptop, they're not talking about free bus fare. The other thing that was politicized for school pupils was the exam results. And I think I've said before, the Labour Party was as good as saying to young people, were you happy with your exam results? If you weren't, well, that's probably the SNP's fault. Whereas Labour would really get this sorted out to make sure you get the grades you deserve. That was the sort of underlying message. Again, a politicized exam system, well, that's what we've got now, with exams being cancelled recently. So I think votes for 16-year-olds is tricky. I don't know whether sex education, particularly LGBT vote winner, I'm not sure they're appealing to votes from that community. I think they're just so convinced they're right, that their philosophy equals human goodness, that it needs promoting to all young people. All right, so another space for people. In Glasgow, there are small bollards so that if an ambulance comes along and there's no cyclists, then drivers can pull over to let the paramedic pass. All right, in Glasgow, there are small bollards so that if an ambulance comes along and there's no cyclist, then drivers... Oh, right, okay. Okay, there must be very small bollards then. I mean, the worry then is people are going to trip over them. I actually know someone who tripped over. It was the base of a bollard. The actual bollard itself had been knocked over by a car, possibly. And this person tripped over the bollard. Was quite badly hurt. But yeah, there's lots of other issues. A few weeks ago, I was on my morning stroll through the Dell along the Water of Leith, and I smelt smoke, and I could see some smoke rising. So I went over, being nosy, to go and see what happened. And it was a nursery, a private nursery, was on fire. It was quite a big fire. So I went up to the road, and there were the fire engines. But the fire engines couldn't park next to the pavement because of the new cycle lanes with bollards. So the fire engines were sort of blocking the whole road unnecessarily. If the cycle lanes hadn't been there, if the bollards hadn't been there, the fire engines would have been able to fit in. The traffic could have carried on flowing, etc. Maybe removable bollards are the answer. Okay, right, that's interesting. Yep. Let's see. Peachy Paul. It is my real name. What, the Peachy or the Paul bit? The Paul bit. Okay, Paul. Right, thanks. Let's. What else have we got in the comments? All right, I'm concerned that there are no exams next year. Why is this? The pupils are sitting closer in the classrooms doing these assessments. No exams next year. Has that actually been declared yet? I mean, my prediction is, well, not prediction. I'm not sure there's ever going to be any more exams in Scotland because the Green Party don't want them. And what the Green Party wants, the Green Party gets. Maybe not immediately, but eventually that's what they get. I find it hard to imagine that they're going to have exams again, because what they've done this time, they've replaced the exams by these other sorts of assessments. I was actually speaking to some teachers recently who were talking about the sort of corruption that's gone on with it, where some schools apparently have taken these sort of semi-official tests produced by the SQA, and they will like take question 1 and give it to the class for homework 1 week, take question 2, give it to them for homework the next week, and then when they've basically done the whole exam for homework, they'll then sit the exam, and that's what the grade will be based on. Apparently in some schools it's even been worse than that. They'll like sit it once and then sit it again if it doesn't go too well. So the major concerns about that. I also heard a story about some pupils faking a positive coronavirus test in order to not have to sit an assessment because they didn't quite fancy sitting it at that point in time. So I mean, all sorts of things going on. But throughout this, when they've had these assessments, the general ethos now in Scottish education is that exams are high pressure, as if that's automatically a bad thing. So, this affects the pupils' well-being. It's too stressful for them. And some people are just not very good at exams. So the direction of travel is that exams are cruel and unnecessary and they don't actually show anything that's any use, which is all completely untrue. But that's the consensus that is growing. And the reason the Scottish Qualifications Authority is being chopped is because they tried to maintain a decent quality, objective testing system with a degree of academic rigor, despite the curriculum for excellence being a woolly load of nonsense. The SQA made a decent attempt to keep some standards in the exams. And as a reward, they've been disbanded to teach them a lesson. Well, not to teach them a lesson. That's their punishment for trying to maintain academic standards in Scotland. Once they're gone, the organisation that replaces them will be in the image of the Green Party, and they won't be so interested in academic standards, testing knowledge. They'll be more interested in social engineering and checking the pupils are happy. And, if you can't do one sort of test, you can probably do another one. So everyone needs to be able to do it in different ways. And the teachers can just make the grades up because they know the children best. And I mean, basically, Scottish qualifications won't be worth the paper they're written on before too long. And then universities will start setting their own entrance exams for it. And then, led by the Green Party, but the other parties will follow, they'll then start saying this is not fair because certain types of students do better in the university entrance exams than others. Therefore, we've got to stop those entrance exams as well. And it will just go on and on. But we shall see. So we'll see what happens next year. I hadn't heard that they'd been cancelled next year, but I wouldn't be surprised because the ethos is that when a challenge comes along, you throw your hands in the air and you say, oh, we've got to give up, throw the towel in. And yeah, that's that. Okay. Right, let's have a look. Piotr, is that how you say it? Is that Polish? Eastern European Polish? I have a 2-year-old daughter right now, sort of saving for a private school. I would send her to a Roman Catholic school, but fortunately the local one was just too close. I know there are not many options. If I fail to do so, I'll be at every single school board meeting. Right, okay, so saving for a private school. Now, I suppose I maybe got some bad news for you. I'll just take the comment away because it's quite large. Some bad news for you there. You might not find the independent schools are any different in that regard. The independent schools are still inspected by Education Scotland, so they're under pressure to emulate state schools. As far as Education Scotland are concerned, their mission is to take the good practice in state schools and force independent schools to do the same. Because Education Scotland is not interested in results, not interested in what works, it's interested in its ideology. So you have to implement its ideology. So with an independent school, I would be wary of assuming that it's really independent in terms of its thinking. I mean, I was just looking the other day at the LGBT Youth Charter Award, where schools can sign up and get a gold award or whatever. I mean, Fettes College, gold award, George Heriot's gold award, George Watson's gold award. So I'm not sure how much leeway there is in independent schools to really be independent. So I'll look into that very carefully. Right, that's an interesting one. Private school voucher program instead of public sector monopoly on education. What does anyone think about that? So instead of just applying to the local school or seeing which state school you can get into, you're given a voucher that has a monetary value, basically, and you choose where you're going to spend your voucher. So the state can run schools, but if someone else wants to set up a school, and you choose it, and enough parents choose it, then that's where the money goes to. Now, that can be a feasible plan. It can give parents choice. It can, the market forces could be powerful within the education system. But if you go to a more remote area, it's hard to see how that can function. But maybe it still can. I mean, if you're in a remote area, you've got your voucher. Okay, there might be only one place you can spend it, but at least you're going to that school with something of the attitude of a customer, rather than just, this is what you're getting, like it or lump it. So it might change the dynamic slightly. It would vastly increase the number of parents who could afford to send their children to some form of independent school. If you've got the state funding, which might be a couple of $1,000 a year, if someone set up a sort of low-cost independent school where the actual cost was, say, $4,000 a year, then their fees could be $2,000 a year. So more people will be able to afford independent education. So that's an interesting idea. We should look at that as part of family party policy. People have suggested that in the past. Some schools and teachers put all Unit 1 questions together and sat them, and all the Unit 2 together. Yes, that's the sort of thing that's meaning. So the SQA produces an exam. It's not called an exam, but it really is. So the idea is the teacher uses it and then they can sort of give them a grade based on it. But you don't need to sit it all at once. You can do little bits of it at a time. I mean, when I was teaching, there was something called Scott-Vec qualifications. I don't know if they still exist. And what I would sometimes have to do is some boys, if they'd sat higher maths, and if we thought there was a risk they might have failed, then they could do this Scott-Vec maths qualification that some universities accepted instead of higher maths. So the exams were finished, and you might have, say, 3 or 4 boys who've got to take this qualification. And it was lots of little tests. Each test would just have, 3 questions in, maybe. And what you could do the test one at a time. So you could teach them how to do exactly that type of question. There it is on the board, wipe it off the board, and they try and do it themselves. And they might need to get 2 out of 3 to pass. If they don't pass, then I go through it again, and then they try again. Not the same test, another one, but basically exactly the same type of questions. And you keep doing that until they've passed. The question that comes, can you actually do it question by question? If the rule was within a test, you needed to get 2 out of 3 questions right to pass, and I would look at the test and I think, well, the first 2 questions are quite easy. The third question, that's really difficult. I would say, just forget the third question. I'm only going to teach them how to do the first 2. And that's all they do. And so they get the first 2 and that's it. They passed. And I would know that I was not teaching those boys anything at all. If you tested them again, like 3 days after, I know they would have learned absolutely nothing. But because the exam system was as it was, that's what I did. I taught them what they needed to do to pass that exam. And that's what teachers will always do. It's up to the people making the exams up to produce a system that makes the pupils really be prepared to a higher standard, which is what, say, higher or advanced higher through extra strength Nat 5 does, because you have to know it all on one day. It's not you don't have to just like remember it for a couple of days and you forget that bit, remember another bit for a couple of days and you forget that bit. You've got to have it all in your mind at one point, which hugely increases the probability of actual long-term learning. So yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that's going on. Oh yeah, strict instructions not to call them exams. That's right. Scottish education is the world of euphemisms. So if you had them sit in a test on which is going to be based their higher grade, for example, you mustn't call it an exam. That's the wrong word. So you see what I mean? Like exams have been demonized already. To suggest they're doing an exam, that would be a terrible thing. They're just assessments. It's the same with punishments. Like punishments are seen as, that's really bad. So teachers who actually still want to have punishments, they have to call them something different. So they call them consequences. Okay, and with the direction of travel is you don't even have those. You just have a friendly chat about whatever goes on. But yes, quite right, Kathy. SNP will permanently abolish exams to cover up the disastrous collapse in standards. I mean, absolutely. What the SNP have done, they've dismantled the systems that were in place to monitor the academic standards in Scotland over the long term. It used to be one of the best systems in the world for monitoring pupil attainment year in, year out, and the SNP has done away with all that because that's not their emphasis. Their emphasis is on making good citizens and global citizens, these sort of things. How they're doing in maths and English and science, that's not really what they're interested in. So yeah, they don't care about that. They care about equality. As long as rich and poor get the same, then that's fine. Right. Well, back to Poland. Yeah, well, there could be something in that. Let's see. Neil, hello, Neil. Decision on 2022 school exams in Scotland will not be taken until August. Nicola Sturgeon indicated that the importance of exams could be downgraded in the future. Right, that's very helpful. Yeah, that was the situation. I thought it was under consideration. So they're going to announce the assessment system in August. In other words, as the course starts, so if you're a teacher teaching higher next year, the week before you start teaching, you won't know how this course is going to be examined. I mean, that's just appalling. It's appalling. If an exam board produced a new syllabus, that would have to be published months and months, if not maybe, a year in advance, to give people a chance to prepare, to produce resources for textbooks to be published, all the preparations to be put in place. But that's another education disaster brewing. Watch this space. At the start of August, teachers will be saying, how am I supposed to know what to do when you've told me just like 2 days ago how this course is going to be examined? It's not on, which is not, but that's the way it's going. Right, Nicola Sturgeon doesn't care about the state she leaves Scotland in, only her own place in history. Now, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because in Scotland, union and nationalism are huge forces. So how many politicians in Scotland are actually bothered about these other issues, or are they just a means to an end? So when the SNP is thinking, okay, education's a mess, whatever, do they really have the mindset, really, who cares? As long as we get over the line and get independence, that's all that matters. On the other hand, some unionists, when they're talking about education, are they really thinking, we're really going to score a few points over the SNP here, that's going to stop independence? Or are they really thinking, education is really important to young people and to the future of this nation, we need to get it right? I think sometimes with unionists, with the Conservatives in particular, I think they often belie the fact that what they're actually thinking is, this is a really great opportunity to knock the SNP in general, rather than concern for improving education or other public services. So, right, thanks very much for those comments. Do keep them rolling in. But I've got some other things I was going to talk about. Another issue that's been on my mind, I've been thinking through. I haven't got to the end with this issue by any means, but I've just started to think about it. And that's about mental health. Because obviously, it's quite well documented that the definition of mental health has been broadened and broadened in the Western world, including in particular in Scotland. So people are being encouraged to class more and more things as mental health issues. Now, obviously, there's such a thing as mental health, and that's very serious, and people need help and treatment for various conditions. But what's classed as a mental health issue is being broadened and broadened to the point where I would say in schools, young people are encouraged to see their everyday emotional ups and downs in terms of mental health, which I'm not at all sure is helpful. And then if you look at it politically, which political parties are most keen on emphasizing mental health? Well, take a guess. Well, the Greens, very much so. are on it. They're saying, counsellors in every schools, we need more mental health emphasis. The Lib Dems as well, they had a policy, something like 10% of the NHS budget has got to be spent on mental health. Now, the obvious question to that, I think, is, so I assume that's more than is spent at the moment. So which part of the budget are they going to have less spent on? I'm sure there's experts managing the NHS, looking at their resources and making difficult decisions. And when they hear the Lib Dems saying, right, 10% for mental health, I'd imagine a lot of them thinking, what are they talking about? That's just impossible. That doesn't make sense. But in election campaigns, it doesn't matter because they don't really get challenged. So the Lib Dems as well, really pushing mental health. And it's just generally there. The further left you go, the further progressive, the more liberal, then the more there is an emphasis on mental health. And I was thinking, why is that? I don't really understand that. I can't see why that would go with the Green Party's philosophy in particular. I mean, is it that they like the idea of people needing the support of the state? Is that the underlying theme? That everyone's vulnerable and in need of care from the government and from professionals? Is that what they quite like? I'm not sure. I'm going to make a video of it before too long when I've actually worked out what I think about it. But if any of you have got thoughts about that, I would be very interested to hear them. I read this book recently, which is on a sort of similar topic, The Coddling of the American Mind, and it talks about this expansion of mental health terminology, particularly in schools, but in wider society as well. And in that book, they said they thought there were three underlying principles that young people are taught and generally are very influential within society. One of them was the things that cause stress, pressure, challenge, they harm you. They don't make you stronger, they harm you. So whereas previously people might have thought that's character building, to face a difficulty, to overcome it, maybe to fail twice and succeed the third time, whatever. This is good for people. It's good for young people. It's good for children. Whereas the tendency now is to think, oh, that's bad for them. That will cause damage. So they're fragile in the sense that a knock just does irreparable damage. The whole thing falls to bits and there's no way of putting it back together again. So I think that's one of the viewpoints that we're facing. Another one is a real emphasis on feelings. What you feel is true. So if you feel that no one likes you, then that must be true. If you feel that someone's been really offensive to you, then that must be true. If you feel it's much too difficult for you, then that must be true. Now, often, I think the roots to good psychological functioning is to be aware of feelings and then think, okay, I'm feeling that. That's my gut instinct. But actually, that's not true. I don't actually think that's right. And it's not helpful. So even though I'm feeling that, I realize that's not actually justified. But that sort of thinking is becoming quite alien. And I would say within education, that sort of thinking is not being encouraged. The opposite sort is accept your feelings, honor your feelings, believe your feelings. Your feelings are reliable. And the last thing I said, the other belief that I think is very unhelpful is the idea of, well, it's polarization basically, there's friend or foe. So when you talk about a person or a group of people, the decision you have to make is, are they goodie or are they a baddie? Are they on your side or are they on the enemy side? Now, life is actually a lot more complicated than that. But you can see that sort of thinking. There's huge polarization going on in politics. They present some research from America that shows that, I don't know, like 30 years ago, what did Democrats and Republicans think of each other? Well, they disagreed, but they sort of thought they were okay. Whereas now, it tends to be they disagree, and they tend to think that the opposite side are really terrible people. So that I think that viewpoint is being passed on to an up-and-coming generation of people for you or against you, are they goodies or baddies. So if that's what you believe, the idea of engaging in debate, trying to find middle ground, learning something from people, maybe tweaking what you believe, well, that sort of goes out the window a little bit. The more important issue is to shut the baddies up and make sure that the goodies have the chance to convert everyone else to be goodies as well. Now, as I'm saying that, I would imagine you're probably thinking, yeah, that's exactly what's what's going on, cancel culture, etc. So that was interesting. So I'll keep thinking about the mental health issue. But if anyone's got any thoughts, I'll be interested to hear it. Let's have a look at some comments. The most recent EAS magazine sent out to teachers indicated that 3/4 of teachers' group meetings would focus on progressive cultural concerns rather than academic ones. Okay. So is that saying that they should do, or that is actually what happens? I'm not at all surprised by that. Yeah, fascinating. If you look at the publications relating to education in Scotland, that's what they're full of. If you look at Education Scotland's pronouncements, General Teaching Council of Scotland, the unions, they're more concerned with progressive social issues than they are with academic issues. Right, what have we got here? Will this new system of examinations be a disadvantage to homeschooling? That would be stressful thought, leaving kids to our state. Will it be a disadvantage to homeschooling? I think the answer is basically yes, it will. Because if you just have an exam, then it doesn't matter where you're prepared for the exam. You can turn up for the exam on a few days, and you can take it the same as everyone else, and you can be measured along with everyone else, and that's absolutely fair. And where you're taught, it doesn't matter. So that really suits home education. These other systems, they will say, you need a teacher assessment in this week and another one here, another one here, another one here. And parents, they're not qualified to do it. So you can't really do the qualifications. I understand that there were serious problems for some home educated children during the pandemic when the exams were cancelled, because all the alternative systems, parents were just told, well, you can't do them. We can't trust you to do them. So I think that could be a serious problem. Scottish Family Party policy is always that schools should have to provide to home educators basically whatever they want. So if home educators want, these interim projects and essays and tests or whatever, if they want them marking by the school, or if they want the child to go and sit them in the school, then they can do that. Now, home educators might not think that's ideal, but if that's what's necessary, the school should make that provision very definitely. Yeah. The other thing with these different forms of exams is it's very open to corruption. It's going to benefit children from more academic households. As soon as you get project work that they take home and do a bit at home, then what's going to happen? It's human nature. There's going to be all sorts of additional influences coming in, affecting what's going on there. So, yeah. I'd be interested to see some statistics on home education. I know quite a few people in Scotland do it, and I hear of more and more choosing to. I'm not sure if there are statistics. Maybe someone's got them, but yeah, I would imagine it's growing at a fair rate. And I'm surprised it hasn't come onto the political agenda to ban home education. In the countries that the SNP looks up to, Sweden, Norway, etc., in some of these countries, it is just point blank illegal to not send your children to school. I think that's the case in Germany as well. There's some cases, it's maybe a year or two ago, where a family wanted to educate their children themselves. So they were prosecuted, and the family tried to escape to go and live in another country, so they didn't have to send their children to school. But they were arrested at the airport. I think that was Germany. And it tends to be the Greens, etc., who start pushing this. Now, have I heard that from the Greens in Scotland? Maybe I remember hearing rumblings of it, but you can guarantee that that is going to come. And it will come in this sort of package. They'll say every child has the right to a proper education, because they all need an equally good start in life. So they all need to be in school in the name of equality. And when the Greens say that, what will the SNP? Will the SNP say, no, that's not true? No, the SNP will think, oh, yeah, that's our sort of language. Yeah, we'll just go along with that. So I would worry that at any stage that might come in. But we shall see. Watch this space. Okay, keep comments rolling in. Right, another couple of things I've been working on this week I will just share with you, give you a little sneak preview. You can tell me what you think about them. In fact, I'll leave that one. I'll go for this one. Next, we're working on some new literature for the Scottish Family Party. So at our conference, we're going to have a lot of new leaflets and booklets to launch. People at the conference can take some copies away with them. We're going to give people a pack. So with the leaflets, we're trying to be a bit creative instead of just giving yet another summary of our policies, just something a bit more unusual to try and get people's interest and draw them in. So various people have been writing things. We're going to try and pull it together just after the summer. But I've worked on a little leaflet about abortion, and it's called "Are You Sure?" So see what you think of this. Stick things in the comments if you want to. So the basic line of it is, it's designed for people who haven't really thought about the issue particularly, and it's saying to them, are you sure? Are you really convinced of your position? So if you're sort of happy to go along with abortion being legal, maybe without having thought about it very deeply, it's basically saying you really do need to be sure, because this is a very serious issue. And then it just goes on to challenge maybe the reasons that they do have in their mind. Right, so over 13,000 abortions take place in Scotland every year. What do you think? Do you think that's just fine? If you do, you really need to be sure. That's because many people believe that each abortion involves the killing of an innocent human. 13,000 a year, it's actually 14,000, I got that wrong. Killed by the state amounts to an outrage of monumental proportions if they're right. So if you're going to accept ongoing mass abortion in Scotland, you really need to be sure of your ground. Why is it that you don't think that the unborn child's life matters? And then I go through various things that the people might think, just very much at a popular level. If you said to people, why do you think abortion's okay? These are the sort of things that might come out. So it's tiny. Human value depends on size, really. So a huge man is more valuable than a slight woman, who is in turn more valuable than an infant. So again, not trying to ram home the conclusion, but trying to help people think, oh, yeah, I suppose so. Maybe that doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't look like a baby. Human value depends on appearance. Really? Is a terribly deformed child of less value because of their appearance? Because they look less like a person? So again, I just hope people will be thinking, oh, yeah, I'm not sure that really adds up. It's inside the mother. Human value depends on location. Really? What's of infinite value in one place has no value when it's somewhere else? How can a child's value change so dramatically in a journey of about 30 centimeters? You get the idea. It couldn't survive on its own. Human value depends on independence. Really? How about a newborn baby? The elderly and infirm don't usually assume a special responsibility to care for the vulnerable. Again, I hope people will think to themselves, oh, yeah, we do, don't we? It's not conscious. It's not conscious. Human value depends on consciousness. Really? Would it be okay to kill you while you're asleep? Now, again, hopefully people think, oh, yeah, that doesn't really add up, does it? It can't do anything. Human value depends on abilities. Really? So the cleverer or more athletic you are, the more your life matters. The more restricted a person's abilities, the less valuable their life is. Again, I hope most people would be appalled at that thought. I think, no, that's completely wrong. The last one, it's unwanted. Human value depends on people's opinion. Really? If a society decides that a certain type of person is unwanted, then they become worthless. Do the lives of children born into rejection and neglect have no value? Again, I hope people will think, oh, no, that's a terrible thing to think. So are you really sure, or are you not facing up to the issue? The message from politicians, the media, and entertainers is usually that abortion is just fine. But are they right? Or are we living in the shadow of a huge moral blind spot? Let's have the debate out in the open. Otherwise, a moral catastrophe might be unfolding under our noses while we do nothing. The stakes couldn't be higher. So we then include, link to the website, etc. and hope that they'll be interested, and we'll follow up looking at some more family party material. So we're thinking that might be something suitable to put into the hands of someone in the street, or someone who hasn't particularly thought about the issue very deeply. So let's see what we've got in the comments here. Right, Stevie again. I believe there's a rise in mental health. Sorry, right, I'm still here. I believe there's a rise in mental health issues because of the rise in zero-hour contracts and agency work. This gives people less control over their own life, and lack of opportunities create financial difficulties and lead to stress. There's a housing crisis and no new council homes are being built. I've seen homelessness myself after a relationship breakdown, and I felt my life was on hold for over a year. The SNP are in Scotland with the gutter, etc. Now, I would say with that, I think those issues could certainly lead to mental health problems in a lot of people. Are those issues more severe than they were in other decades? I'm not sure. Probably some are, some are not. So I think those genuine triggers to serious mental health problems, you can understand that would lead to serious mental health problems. I think they're very important issues. I think what I'm saying more about is it's not so much what's happening with what would have been called mental health problems 30 years ago. It's more the things that are now called mental health problems that wouldn't have been called that not too many years ago. And the encouragement of people to interpret more everyday emotions and experiences in terms of mental health, that I think is the thing I'm focusing on. And why is that shift associated so much with like the Green Party end of politics and the other parties towards that end? I don't quite understand that. Okay, someone been on the internet. Thank you very much. 5,000 to 6,000 homeschooled in Scotland. Okay, 5,000 to 6,000. Let's put that in context. How many school pupils are there? And have I got 1 million in my mind? Probably over 1 million school pupils. So that's quite a small number. But it's going to be small because the challenges are just so enormous. With younger children, the time commitment and the intensity is incredible. With older children, the problem has been able to cover the whole syllabus. But there are not many people who can really teach a full range of subjects at upper high school level. So how many would like to would be another question. If there was a voucher scheme and there were schools with a different ethos and a different approach that you could choose to send your children to, how many people would choose that? I think that's when we would really find out the situation. I think there would be a massive exodus from the current mainstream state school model towards alternatives such as that. So yeah, that's interesting. Thank you very much. Right, good approach to start thinking, but it's horrible to think that people have not already thought about it during the reality. Right, well, I'm not sure which. Probably you typed that at the point where I was talking about something, and I'm not quite sure what that was. So you can maybe make that clearer. Okay, who is society? Well, society isn't a person. Society is, I would say, just a word used to describe the population. And the population, not so much as individuals, but the way they interact as a group, their interrelationships and the systems and structures in place to enable I can't use the word society, to enable the nation to function in various ways. That would be my interpretation of society. Right, a few minutes ago, keep the comments coming in. I just got one more thing to talk about. We've got 10 minutes to go. I think we could just about squeeze this in. Let's see if I get interrupted. Well, not interrupted. If I go off at a tangent with comments, I might not quite get to the end. So again, thinking about these leaflets, we're trying to think about something a bit novel, so to catch people's attention to put in it. So for our education leaflet, we've come up with the 10 commandments of Scottish education. So the idea is that these are 10 principles that generally are accepted in Scottish education. So if you hear about something that's happening in the world of education, you can probably explain it with reference to one of these 10 commandments. So here we are. Now, the first one, I've written it in sort of language that parallels the language in the actual 10 commandments in the Bible. I mean, someone said, might some people be offended by that? I think, oh, no, surely not. You surely hope not. I mean, it's not mocking the 10 commandments. It's just, creating a parallel to make a point. So, well, the first one, the Government Education Scotland and the teaching unions, 3 groups in one educational establishment, form the only source of the one true truth. We were saying earlier about the unions, weren't we? The Government Education Scotland, they all think the same, they all say the same. Education Scotland brooks no rival. It is a jealous regulatory body visiting bleak inspection reports on institutions who blaspheme against its decrees. So you do it their way, or they criticize you because you're doing it wrong. All other views have no place in schools in modern Scotland, apart from maybe the odd quiet rebellious chat in the corner of the staff room. I mean, that is the situation in lots of schools. Off the cuff, private conversations, you might hear what some teachers really think, but in the actual formal discussions, it's a one-way street. Right, number 2. This is a bit related to what I was just saying. Learners are fragile. Academic requirements should be continually diluted to avoid putting them under too much pressure. Any experience of stress, uncertainty, and challenge will impact their well-being, probably doing permanent damage. Learners must be taught to monitor their emotional well-being incessantly, looking out for problems. This perpetual search for negatives helps keep pupils in a positive frame of mind. All right, next one. Knowledge is an outmoded educational element that is to be replaced by more enlightened skills, attitudes, and experiences. The specifying, teaching, and testing of knowledge has no place in 21st century education because it clearly is now the 21st century. Now, if you're thinking that makes no sense, well, of course it doesn't. That's the point. It's a joke, but that's the sort of argument you get. It's the 21st century, therefore knowledge doesn't have much of a place in education. That's the sort of line. More important than the acquisition of mere knowledge is the internalizing of positive values, universal values such as left, liberal, progressive political philosophies, radical environmentalism, the celebration of LGBT identities, sexual license, racial identity activism, and feminism. Pupils must learn critical thinking skills so that they fully appreciate the correctness of these views. Number 5. If you treat pupils nicely enough, they will be nice in return. Rudeness is really a lack of social skills. Bullying is really a lack of empathy. Non-optimally behaving pupils always feed back that they would prefer not to be punished. Therefore, punishment is counterproductive, unnecessary, inhumane, and negatively impacts pupil happiness, also known as well-being. Number 6. As a matter of equality, pupils who smash up classrooms, attack teachers, and destroy any possibility of learning should be allowed to remain in mainstream schools because this is inclusive. If they spend an hour on the PlayStation in the reflection hub to cool off after a destructive episode, that shows that the policy really is working well. Commandment 7. Every type of pupil should achieve the same average academic standard. Otherwise, action needs to be taken to restore equality. Unless it's girls doing better than boys, in which case that's fine because the future is female. When throwing money at an inequality has failed again, the next step is to remove any objective meritocratic element from the assessment procedures. Once teachers choose the grades, any inequality can be tackled effectively, thus creating a more just and fair society. Number 8. Parents are bungling amateurs who often corrupt their children with wrong think. Schools must therefore regularly check that children are happy with the service being offered by their parents and actively correct insidious beliefs inculcated by parents. For example, some children arrive at school having been indoctrinated to believe that pornography is wrong, but schools can be effective in countering such misinformation. Number 9. Schools must always listen to children more. especially just after the children have been told exactly what to say. The pupil voice can then play a vital part in forming school policy in perfect accord with government thinking. Number 10, authority is a bad thing, e.g. Hitler. Children have the right to be treated equally with adults. They should never be told what to do, as this is harmful to well-being or even abusive. When this policy has bedded in, some schools find it beneficial. Some schools find that establishing a closer relationship with the local police is beneficial, and many staff urgently seek employment in other schools in order to share their experience of good practice, of course. In addition, some staff decide to leave teaching altogether, but we can do without unenlightened dinosaurs who can't tolerate routine defiance and abuse. Yeah, so we thought that might be a bit of fun for our education leaflets, that maybe that might circulate in a few schools among teachers and parents and pupils maybe as well. We do hear from pupils quite regularly. Abortion leaflets get people thinking, well, let's hope so. I hope so. It's an issue that if people watch the BBC, mainstream media, you could go for years without ever coming across any argument or discussion about abortion. So we really are starting from square one with a lot of people. But the advantage of that is that what we've got to say is often fresh and new. So people hear it and think, oh, that's interesting. That's something to think about. Whereas the other side, they've heard it all before. So, yeah, let's hope it does. I think it's a good idea. Many who are in favor of abortion know it's wrong and just avoid thinking of the horrible reality of it. I completely agree. I completely agree. Yeah. There's a trend among the pro-choice movement. And the trend is, I think, for them to be more and more brazen. I mean, during the election campaign, things people were saying in response to our pro-life message were quite shocking. People, I'm not talking like just a couple of cranks. Well, I'm talking about dozens of people who would come back saying that we'd say, put a picture of a fetus, and they would make jokes about how they would like to eat it, for example, this sort of thing, or cartoons of like babies being killed and this sort of thing. I mean, it couldn't be more sick. So I think that's okay. That might be the lunatic fringe, but just in general, the pro-choice movement is becoming more brazen and more open, and there are more people willing to say, yes, we're aware it's killing, but that's the way it's got to be because we've got these more important reasons. So the more that comes out, I think that helps our case, because it makes it easier to convince the undecideds in the middle that we're the reasonable people with right on our side. Knowledge is power reversed. Lack of knowledge is lack of power, or power is knowledge. It's certainly in education in Scotland, the de-emphasizing of knowledge is disastrous. Professor Lindsay Patterson is a bit of a, well, I don't know if he's a lone voice. He's the lone voice that I hear in any case from the academic educational establishment. I mean, if ever you find any of his stuff online, read it. It's really, really good. It focuses on the academic side rather than some of the broader issues that we focus on as a family party. But in terms of looking at the academic curriculum, he's very, very good. And he really challenges the establishment on the issue of knowledge and its central place. All right, one last comment from John. Hello, John. Lib Dems and Greens want abortion up to birth, and Labour does as well. In the last election, UK Labour had that as their policy. Who do they think will kill the baby? Right, I'll assume they're expecting some doctor, surgeon, or whatever will have to do that. It's a great question to ask these parties, though. What procedure are they envisaging in order to enable abortions, a full term, basically? I mean, that's just, it just makes it, doesn't it? First Minister's question time. Could the SNP fund organisations that argue for decriminalisation of abortion? Wouldn't it just be great if these leaders of these parties could really be put on the spot? Keir Starmer, Patrick Harvey, the Lib Dems as well. I mean, really ask them, what method do you think ought to be used? Can you describe it to us, how these full-term abortions will be carried out? I mean, I sometimes joke with people. I find myself making this joke quite often. I just wish that some of the prominent political figures in Scotland, I wish we could get them tied to a chair, and so we could force them to talk to us and discuss some of these issues. Now, that's obviously not real. We don't really want to tie them to a chair. But the point of what I'm saying is, it's as though that's what it would take to actually get a discussion going on these issues. The media don't really touch them. The politicians don't challenge each other on them. And when they're asked, the politicians will tend to just evade and avoid the question and just talk for so long about something else that the person asking the question gets fed up and they end up not answering it. But if they were tied to a chair in a room and we could just insist that they're going to answer, it really would be fascinating, wouldn't it? So we'll see what we can do over the coming years, how many people we can bring into debate on the live stream as well. We're going to ask a lot of people to see if they will come on. Right. Yeah, I mean, doctors at the moment, I know doctors who won't consent to abortions. You know, they need the signature of 2 doctors. I mean, I know some doctors who just won't do that in any circumstances. Well, in any mainstream circumstances. So they'll be passed on to another doctor to get that permission. Freedom of conscience for doctors is, and medical staff in general, in fact, lots of professions, is quite a hot topic. And I think it's going to come to the fore increasingly in years to come. Right. Okay, that is 10 o'clock. So thank you for your company this evening. Thanks for your comments. So hopefully next week we'll have a Muslim lady speaking to Phil Tanzer. That will be fascinating. I won't say about the topic, but you can wait and see if we manage to get that sorted out. If we don't manage to get that lady, then I guess I'll have a chat with Phil about some issues, and we will look forward to your questions then. Okay, so thanks for watching, and good night.